Good morning, my dear students. Today's topic of discussion is oral contraceptive and its adverse drug reactions and therapeutic uses. And to understand this, you have to understand the important components of oral contraceptive devices. And two of the very important things are estrogen and progesterone. But before going to that part, let us recapitulate certain things about from the history of oral contraceptives. The most important one is FDA approves this contraceptive pills in 1960, and which actually revolutionized the whole world. And 1963, the first oral contraceptive put on drug market, and number one form of birth control uh, is this oral contraceptive, and it takes its role or overturns the role of the other methods from 1965 onwards. And late 1970s, FDA mandated warning that indicated oral contraceptives carried risk of cancer due to its components such as estrogen, and also responsible for causing blood clots. Uh, So the primary use of these oral contraceptives are basically to prevent accidental pregnancy, whereas the secondary uses are heavy or irregular menstruation, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Usually the pill contains 20 to 40 microgram of ethinyl estradiol, which is basically a synthetic form of estrogen, and varying amounts of either levonorgestrel or norethindrone as the progesterone component. The various amounts are being tried. There are certain things nowadays obtained as mini pills, so there are so many other things are also available. And the types of regimen we are actually using uh, usually given in a 21-day pack. But to understand this role of oral contraceptives, one has to understand the physiological role or the physiology of ovulation in the female, and it's basically a complex interaction between the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, and the gonadal sex steroids. The system is usually controlled by three feedback mechanisms. The first one is long feedback mechanism. Gonadal sex hormones act on the hypothalamus by way of negative feedback mechanism, that is estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, or a positive feedback mechanism which is given by estrogen. There is a short feedback mechanism. This involves a direct action of sex hormones on the anterior pituitary, and it's regulating the secretion of follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And lastly, the ultra short negative feedback mechanism. This comprises regulation of pardon this comprises regulation of the hypothalamic GnRH by the pituitary, follicular stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. And it is basically regulating both ways, the positive as well as the negative feedback mechanism. So there are three feedback mechanisms: long, short, and ultra short. Dopamine found at the nerve endings in the hypothalamus is involved in the release of gonadotropin releasing hormone. That means the one which is called GnRH, which in turn affects both LH and FSH secretory cells of the anterior pituitary. The mode of action of GnRH is believed to be similar in both sexes, except for its cyclicity in female. Secretory activities are modulated differently by estrogen, progesterone and testosterone. The natural GnRH isolated from human, porcine and ovine or bovine hypothalamic is decapeptide. That means it contains 10 peptides. They are identical in structure, have been synthesized. It regulates the synthesis and secretion of both FSH and LH. Since it predominantly causes release of LH, it is also known as LH releasing hormone. The ovarian function is controlled by hypothalamic GnRH and pituitary follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing secretion, which is modulated by various positive and negative feedback mechanisms. Gonadotropic releasing hormone secreted in discrete pulses. It stimulates the synthesis and secretion of LH and FSH. At puberty, initially, this LH and FSH, secretion occurs only during sleep, but later on it occurs throughout the day and night. The sequence of various hormonal changes that occur during a normal 28 days menstrual cycle in female, you can see it from your physiology book, where you will see there is initially this follicular stimulating hormone curve is lying below this LH1, and then you see that in the time of menstrual cycle, there will be some different types of curves which are being demonstrated in the follicular phase and the luteal phase. So in the follicular phase you will see different kind of curve, whereas in the luteal phase or ovulation phase you will see a different kind of curve. Day 1 is defined as the first day of menstrual flow, whereas the day preceding the first day of the next menstrual flow is designated as the last day of the cycle. Generally, cycles between 21 and 35 days, it average 28 days and are accepted as normal. The duration of flow is usually between 3 to 5 or 3 to 7 days. Now, the pulsatile release of GnRH from the hypothalamus initiates a normal menstrual cycle. Ovarian follicular growth, once initiated by FSH, proceeds independently in the pre-ovulatory phase. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll see here the ovulation is basically comprises of two phases, the follicular phase and the ovulation phase. In follicular phase, LH and FSH concentrations increase due to GnRH. There is follicular growth, antrum fluid volume usually increases, and blister forms in ovary. Whereas in the ovulation phase, or the ovulatory peaks of FSH and LH occurs usually between the days 11 to 23 of the menstrual cycle. If you take a single day, it's usually 14 to 15 days. So its timing has no relationship to the length of the cycle. Following the large quantity of LH, that is called the LH surge, the follicle size increases, resulting in follicular rupture and release of an ovum, and this is basically called the follicular phase, ovulation phase. And the follicle released from the ovary, it started secreting estrogen, and corpus luteum triggers release of progesterone and estrogens. So the LH surge suppresses now the granulose cell proliferation and triggers the induction of progesterone release. That much is clear from the second phase, in the ovulation phase. The peaks of plasma estradiol and 17-alpha hydroxyprogesterone precede the mid-cycle LH peak, that means luteinizing hormone peak. Mostly follicular stimulating hormone stimulated follicles undergo atresia, whereas one follicle, the dominant follicle, per menstrual cycle becomes the Graafian follicle. And various positive and negative feedback mechanisms regulate the integration of various hormones to produce normal pattern of the menstrual cycle. Estimation of these hormones will give you some idea about the follicular function. Abrupt increase in estradiol stimulates the pituitary gland to cause a sudden rise of LH hormone and leading to ovulation. Under the influence of follicular stimulating hormone and LH, ovary produces estradiol, which is basically a potent estrogen, androstenedione, and small amount of testosterone. Testosterone is again converted to dihydrotestosterone in skin and estrogen in the adipose tissues. So, a fat female probably is having more dihydrotestosterone in comparison to a thin one. Ovary in addition also secretes inhibin, that is inhibin A and B, which selectively inhibits follicular stimulating hormone release, whereas GnRH is basically a major regulator of luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone. The synthesis of follicular stimulating hormone is also controlled by another peptide that is called activin. So, activin usually have a positive role, whereas inhibin has a negative role. They belong to the family of transforming growth factor beta, and inhibition of GnRH secretion by estradiol or progesterone, which is being shown here in this slide, by if you see this negative feedback inhibition by estradiol or progesterone and selective inhibition of follicular stimulating hormone by inhibin, these are critical for the development of single mature oocyte, and activin stimulates the synthesis of follicular stimulating hormone. Following rupture, the follicle undergoes reorganization to form corpus luteum, which secretes mainly progesterone, estradiol, 17-alpha hydroxyprogesterone, and also inhibin A. A corpus luteum is an independent endocrine organ, and the lifespan of corpus luteum during a non-pregnant cycle in humans averages around 11 days, whereas in the functional lifespan of this corpus luteum is around 9 to 10 weeks. Since 17-alpha hydroxyprogesterone is synthesized mainly by the corpus luteum, not by human placenta, its blood level reflects the function of corpus luteum during pregnancy. Following conception, placental human chorionic gonadotropin takes over the function of corpus luteum. So, these in brief about the whole cycle, the relationship between the hypothalamo pituitary ovarian relationship and different phases of ovulation. Clinically, pulsatile GnRH can restore the normal gonadotropin release pattern in patients with hypothalamic hypogonadism, and the pituitary response in GnRH varies throughout the menstrual cycle. It is becoming maximum at the mid-cycle, and sometimes it so happens that there is a self-priming effect is not observed following a continuous GnRH infusion. If somebody infuses GnRH for treatment of certain things, certain disease, and you will not see the self-priming effect, and which results in an initial increase for a short time, followed by a sustained and progressive decline in luteinizing hormone secretion. This is due to a down regulation of GnRH receptors. So, as I said, it's basically about a complex relationship between the three. The combined mode of action of these oral contraceptive pills is basically the action of estrogen and progesterone in combination. They will prevent ovulation. They will thicken the mucus in the cervix so that so that it's not possible for the sperm to penetrate, and it thins the endometrium. So basically these are the three functions served by these oral contraceptive pills. In a non-pregnant human female which synthesizes two biologically active estrogen, estradiol and estrone, and much larger amount of prohormone estrone sulfate. This last is converted to estrone in the peripheral tissues. The third weakly active hormone is estriol. So there are three, which is synthesized by the placenta. So there are three estrogen hormones: estradiol, estrone, and estriol. The role of estrogen is to develop secondary female sex characteristic, thicken the endometrium, and it regulates the menstrual cycle. Whereas the regulation is basically the production of estrogen regulated by follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, as I described before, and both produced in the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. And ultimately from there you will get a feedback inhibition. So it's the the flow coming from hypothalamus, the release of GnRH, then pituitary stimulated follicle stimulating hormone, the follicles, and which ultimately leads to the release of estrogen. So as I mentioned, there are three estrogen forms which are available: estradiol, estrone, and estriol, and one of them is obtained from placenta. The physiological function of estrogen is promotes development of female reproductive tract, promotes development of female secondary sexual characteristics, and it stimulates the proliferative or pre-ovulatory phase of endometrium. It also causes vasodilatation of capillaries. It induces metabolic effects such as retention of nitrogen, sodium. It exerts cardioprotection in females. So till the age of 45, the females are having lesser propensity to having any kind of cardiovascular disease due to proper maintenance of LDL level, which is usually remains lower than male. So it gives them protection, maintains the integrity of the skeleton in female of reproductive age group, and following menopause usually the women they suffer from osteoporosis, and promotes the union of epiphysis with the metaphysis. Ultimately, this estrogen will also support pregnancy and parturition by inducing favorable changes in the endometrium, vagina, cervical mucosa, and uterine growth and contraction. The problem with these estrogen is the carcinogenicity. These estrogens are carcinogenic in nature, and especially in animals, and are implicated in the genesis of cancers of the endometrium, breast, liver, and vagina in female patients. It also has anti-androgenic action. They found to be beneficial in prostate cancer, which is basically androgen dependent. You can do a bioassay so that from the crystalline pure estrogen preparation, which doesn't require bioassay, but the activity of estrogenic substance is bioassayed in rats by the method of Allen and Dorsey, which is based upon the observation of typical cornified vaginal smear following estrogen administration. This test is very sensitive, and the agent is applied locally into the vagina, and immunoassay is now used in clinical practice. So there are different estrogen receptors, ER alpha and ER beta. Their mode of actions are more like corticosteroid. They passes through phospholipid barrier. These are present as a clump. These estrogen, progesterone, then the corticosteroid. It is being separated. The ligand binds with the hydrophobic region of the receptor, forming the capsule over the ligand binding pocket. This complex will ultimately taken from cytoplasm to nucleus, and estrogen and ER complex, it binds to estrogen response element in the nucleus to initiate transcriptions. The exons are introns are binding with each other. The exons are separated, and then it leads to the synthesis of protein, that is called translation. And in this picture, I'm just, you'll see the distribution of ER alpha and ER beta in different organs. You see the central nervous system having both, cardiovascular system also having both, whereas liver and GI tract are only having liver is having ER alpha and GI tract is only having ER beta. Urogenital tract is also having both ER alpha and ER beta. So this is basically the distribution of estrogen receptors. And there are some agents which are known as phytoestrogens. These are non-steroidal compounds such as isoflavones, ligands present in plants, red clover, and these are converted in the intestine to compounds with 1 by 10,000 the estrogenic activity of estradiol. Some of them also have anti-estrogenic activity. Phytoestrogens have been commercially promoted for use in postmenopausal women for prevention of osteoporosis, breast cancer, and ischemic heart disease. The evidence in their favor is largely epidemiological, and this female patients usually they are taken from the Asian countries whose daily diet contains substantial quantity of these soy, have a lower prevalence of the above elements. So that's about the phytoestrogens. And one more thing you have to remember, that is selective estrogen receptor modulator. So these are the drugs which are basically binding to the two estrogen receptors being shown, ER alpha and ER beta. They are partially estrogenic in some tissues with anti-estrogenic activity or no activity in others. The examples are tamoxifen. It has anti-estrogenic action in the breast but estrogenic action on the bone and endometrium. Raloxifene is most selective and has estrogenic action on the bone, anti-estrogenic action on the breast, and very negligible action on the endometrium. Like raloxifene, there is another one which is benjidoxifene, has estrogenic effects on bone. So actually these raloxifene, benjidoxifene, these can be used in osteoporosis, having anti-estrogenic effect on the uterus but estrogenic effect on bones. It prevents osteoporosis, so we can prescribe these drugs. It is advisable as FDC with conjugated estrogens for the treatment of vasomotor symptoms and prevention of osteoporosis in postmenopausal female. Hello.